Good morning from Vietnam, Eric. Good afternoon to you. Thanks a lot for spending your afternoon joining our show and share your stories to our global audience. And on behalf of the listeners around the world, we want to say thank you to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ha, for having me. I'm excited to be here. It's a pleasure.
Hey, since you haven't been to our country, so please accept our formal invitations. The next time that you and your friend, your family members, if anyone come to our country, please let us know. We would love to take you guys out and enjoy our pho and coffee here, okay?
Excellent. Two of my favorite things. So that's definitely on the list, and I'm going to hold you to it. Ha.
Absolutely. And Eric, for a little taste of our culture, it's very honor for our audience if we can have you to do a little introduction about who you are and the works you are doing. Can you do it for us, please?
Sure, absolutely. So my name's Eric Spencer. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of a company called SkyeTeam. SkyeTeam is a leadership development consultancy or a boutique firm. We work with companies ranging in size from startups to Fortune 50s, and we tend to operate in what we call 3 lanes. We do what we call the one-to-many lane or programmatic leadership development. So we take cohorts of folks, 20 to 30 people on a months-long journey, either at the manager level or the leader of leaders level. So groups over time in cohorts, the one-to-many channel. We also do intact teamwork. We work with teams over time. We call this the one-to-few channel. So smaller teams over time. We work with teams from a lot of times from inception. And for years, I've been working with a couple of teams at this point for several years over time. And then the third lane we play in is executive coaching or one-to-one. So one-to-many, one-to-few, one-to-one. And the company SkyeTeam, we've been around, was started by Morag Barrett, our founder, my co-conspirator, partner in crime. She started the company in 2007, and I joined her in 2012, and have been here ever since. It is, it's 2024. I'm entering my 12th year at SkyeTeam doing this work, and I always tell people I have the best job in the world because I get to do really meaningful, impactful work for clients that I really like, who are doing good things in the world.
Yeah.
And I get to do that work with people that I legitimately love. So
Wow.
It's a blast.
Wow. Eric, you have a phenomenal career journey that you introduced to us in about 90 seconds. It's not fair for our audience. So this conversation, we're going to dive in deeper. But on behalf of the people that are in the workforce, we want to say thank you first because you and Mark have been making, leaders better, making managers become better version of themselves so that they can create a culture, a working environment that's good for everybody. Okay, so
Yeah.
bravo for that.
Thank you.
All right, and let's travel time together because I believe that everything have attached the beginning, right? So for you to have this phenomenal journey, we want to trace back how it, beginning, how it started. Okay, so
Yeah.
when I was little, I always enjoyed becoming an astronaut. Okay, so jumping
Yep,
different
that's a
planets
good
seemed
one.
pretty cool, but life didn't give me any chance to do that, Eric. So it took me to very different directions.
Yeah.
So for you, when you were little, what was your dream about your future self, though?
I was always going to be a musician. You can see there's
Musician.
guitars hanging behind me here, one over there. There's a whole recording studio over here off camera. Yes, ever since I was probably about 10 years old. I wanted to play music. I started life as a drummer, and I played in drum corps and marching bands and until I started to get a little older and I learned about rock and roll music, and I learned about bands like Kiss and AC/DC and Led Zeppelin, and I was like, I want to do that. And I started playing in bands when I was 12. So 12 years old, and I played in bands. I still play in a band today. But I played in bands my whole life. I did it as my actual living. I worked in a working band that had a record deal and a van and a lawyer. You needed those things. I worked as a studio musician and a recording engineer. So I worked in the music industry for a long time. That's what I thought I was going to do. And, I got to a point in my career. I got out of graduate school and I had my first real job, and that company sold. So I was at a crossroads, sort of inflection point, and I was in my 20s at the time. And I thought, okay, I can go get another job and do the adult thing. Or I heard about this band that had a record coming out and they were looking for a drummer. So I auditioned for the band. I got in and I spent the next 4 years essentially living in a van with 4 other dudes, traveling mostly the United States, one end of it to the other, playing really interesting, fun shows, and playing some really lonely strip mall on a Tuesday night shows for no money. So I did that for a long time. And as that ride started to come to an end, I was like, okay, it's time to figure out what I want to be when I grow up and get serious. And I wanted to get into leadership development and organizational behavior. That's what I studied in school. And I learned very quickly that if you hadn't done that job, nobody wanted to pay you to do that job. So I thought, how can I get into that field? Well, that usually is attached to or housed within human resources. I'll get a job in HR. And I charmed a very nice Scottish lady into hiring me to be her HR person, as the company that she worked for was based in the UK, was moving into the US. And I started my HR stroke leadership development journey in 1999. And I moved from Washington, D.C., where I lived at the time, to San Francisco, just in time for the dot-com bubble to burst and everything to come crashing down.
Eric, you have a very free spirit. When you were young, enjoyed the music and then traveling around the country with, the other 3 guys in a van, right? And doing the tour. It's amazing, right? I want to bring you back into the point where you decided to study a major, and you chose to study in the organizational behavior, right? So why did you choose that? Why did you choose that field?
So it's interesting. My major choice dilemma started early. So, having identified as a musician, that's what I wanted to do. I started school as a music major, and my father quickly said, I'm not going to pay for that. So you should change to something in which you could have a real job and make real money. And I said, okay. And I caved, and I changed to business because it seemed to be the most utilitarian. I didn't find this work until it was my junior year. So my 3rd year in undergraduate. And I had rigorous criteria for class selection because I was a working musician and I had a job. So those last 2 years of school, I decided I'm only going to go to school on Tuesday, Thursday. So I'm doing all my classes between Tuesday and Thursday, because I'm working Friday nights and I'm, working probably Sunday too. So I need Mondays and Fridays for flex. So I was looking for an upper division elective business class that was given on Tuesday or Thursday. And I found a class called Management Systems, and I had no idea what that meant. But it was taught by a guy who became my first mentor. He was a PhD candidate at the time. This was at Arizona State University, and his name is Christopher Neck, and he's a big OBOD guy. And this class was essentially a distillation of the work that he was doing on his doctoral thesis. So he would come back into class with stories from organizations like America West Airlines or WL Gore, the makers of Gore-Tex. And he would talk about what's going on in their cultures and tell us about the work that he's doing, and we would help him solve those problems. And I remember sitting in his office one day, and I said, this is a real job. People pay you money to do this work? He's like, isn't that the craziest thing? And I was like, this is what I want to do, I think. So when I got into graduate school, I had that in my mind, and I did my concentration in organizational behavior and industrial and organizational psychology so that I could really get into that and figure out what that space meant. So I came to it late, but I stayed in school and got another degree so that I could do it.
So at what age did you have that conversation with Christopher?
Yeah. So I would have been 20, 19 or 20.
1920.
Yeah.
So you came to his office, you had a conversation with him and asking, is that really true that that organization pay him to do the kind of works, and that gave you the sparkle moment that you enjoy, that's something that you're gonna do in the future, right?
That was my 20-year-old thought. Yes.
So now moving to the HR in the .com time in 1999, 2000, right? Tell us how that journey evolved into now for the 12 years working at SkyeTeam, and I noted here that you work with 10,000 plus leaders around 30 countries and 4 continents. That's amazing. Amazing that these leaders having the teams, the people that they manage. So the ripple effects that could hit around 100,000, 200,000 people around the world, right? Tell us.
It sounds impressive, but at this point, I think it just means I'm old.
No.
So getting into that HR job, this was like my first real job in the field that I thought I wanted to be in, and it was high times, right? It was .com, it was San Francisco, it was a big deal, and within a year, the cracks started to really emerge in that .com bubble. I mean, we knew it to be a bubble now. Then we didn't want to believe it. And as things started to crack, everybody was looking for what's next. How do we move forward? And I managed to get transferred from San Francisco to Denver because the cost of living in the Bay Area was just, well, still is, right? It's expensive. And I was an HR guy. I wasn't making, chief engineer money. So I got transferred to Denver, which had a pretty good technology base. And as that company wound down, we ended up selling it back to the company from which the founder had come. I learned that there were a bunch of hardware companies here in the Boulder Valley, and I moved from software into hardware, and I worked HR for a company called Quantum that was doing hard drives and tape drives at the time. And there's every major player in the storage industry is here in the Boulder Valley. So I did that for a while, managed to stay on the technical side. I moved from hardware into online retail. I worked at Target.com for a while. And then I did my own consultancy for a few years for just to see if I could do it. And then I got recruited by a decent sized telecom company based here in the Denver metro, at the time called Level 3 Communications. And Level 3 Communications actually changed my life because of the quality of the people that company hired. I met so many really quality, high caliber folks, good at their craft, good human beings, in my years there. Really changed a lot about how I approached doing my job and about how work could be done in a meaningful way. And it's interesting because I did a couple of startups after Level 3 and then had the opportunity to join Morag, and that's a funny story in and of itself. But when we decided to do that at the beginning of my SkyeTeam tenure, a lot of our clients were people that we knew from back at Level 3. It was the alumni ripple effect. As people would move to new organizations, they would call and have us come in and give them a hand. Wow. But the Morag thing wasn't a sure thing. It wasn't a sure thing. It was a very chance meeting.
Wow. Eric, I note here on this piece of paper, all right, that a very beautiful thing that you say is how work could be done in a meaningful way by the time that you worked at level three communications, right? And
Mhm.
then that is when the sparkling moment for you to have a new, career terrestrial, right? So tell
Yeah.
us what happened there at level three that that changed your decisions.
Yeah, well, it was at the time, it was one of the larger companies that I'd worked for. So it's easy to complain about how slow and how bureaucratically things are done in large, complex organizations, right? Everybody complains about how hard it is to get stuff done at work. And I'm not saying it was easy all the time, but what I learned in that experience was it was just the quality of the people, the work ethic of the people, the willingness of the people to persevere and find a solution that actually worked. You know, at the time, HR was it was changing. The model was changing from more of a transactional, you know, generalist, the old sort of personnel type model, into this new thing, you know, the business partner model. I know Dave Ulrich's been on your show, and I know he's a big fan of this.
Yeah.
So the business partner model, I had worked in an organization at that point in time that had that in name only. They read the articles and they said this is what our structure is going to be, but the work was still pretty transactional.
Yeah.
And when I got to level 3, they had people to do the transactional work. We had a service center within HR that would deal with all of the things that would take up the majority of my time in my old HR manager jobs. Um, and their focus was on doing strategic business partner work. And that's when the light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, oh, this is the best job in the house.
Oh.
I get to see everything, and I am a confidant to the leader of a team, section, function, business. Um, I get to help that leader figure out how to make this team better. What a
Mm.
cool job, right? And the execution was pretty darn good in HR at level 3, and I had never experienced that before. I heard a lot of people talk about it. I've seen a lot of articles and books written about how it could work, but I
Mm.
had never experienced it, and it really worked. And we really earned the trust of the client organizations, and that manifested years later when those people reappeared as clients. I have a client to this day that I met at level 3, and you know, now I'm almost embarrassed to say it's been almost 25 years since I met the guy, right? It's been a long time.
Uh-huh. So Eric, the term HRBB, right, business partner back then was relatively new, and you
Yeah.
had, and even the textbook back then was, basically draw on something that on the professional pupil
Mhm.
vision about what the business partner is supposed to be doing that. So you were trusted by the leaders in level at level 3 to help them grow the team and grow the
Yeah.
people. So tell us, what did you do when you not knowing anything about that you have and still can earn the trust from those leaders to lead the team?
Yeah, so it's I mean it's a legitimate question, and it was a thing that we struggled with even in that pretty well executed machine. Um, there were folks, there were a couple types of HR people back in that time frame. There were the
Mm,
traditionalists who loved doing the more HR generalist type of work, and
mm,
then there were folks who were eager to try this business partner thing. Now, at this point in my career, I had worked in the operations side of a couple of companies. I had worked as in my own company, right? I'd run my own operation for 4 years. So I had, and I grew up in an entrepreneurial household. My dad owned his own company since I was about 6. So
ah,
I had been around business and business operations for a long time. So for me, it was super easy. It was like now I was not only allowed to, but expected to weigh in with my business acumen, which was something that some of my peers in HR that had spent their whole careers in HR just didn't have. It's not that they couldn't develop it. They just hadn't had those experiences, right? Their first job out of school was HR generalist or HR specialist, and they stayed in that channel their whole career. Well, I've been all over the place and trying to market every band that I'd been in for my whole life. I mean, I had a lot of different business running experiences. I'm doing way too many air quotes today. I don't know why this is happening so much. But I had a lot of other things to draw upon. And the turning point for me was when I realized, like I said, not only was I allowed to do it, I was expected to do it. And when I would sit down with a leader and I would say, hey, I was looking through the financials last night and I have some questions. The first time I said that, the person looked at me and like, well, the HR person's looking at the financials? I mean, great. Never would have expected that. But I'm like, yeah, I have some questions. Why do we do things this way? And it kind of blew their mind. So it opened the doors to different level of conversation than I was having in my HR jobs prior.
Beautiful, beautiful. And it's like expected. So it's a decision that you make also when you move into that role. So that made you successful. So from helping a few leaders at level 3 to helping 10,000 plus leader is a huge jump. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me, how did you get into SkyeTeam, the journey that led you to SkyeTeam and that phenomenal journey up to now years?
So I left level 3 to go be VP of HR for another software company. It was a startup. Startups run one of two ways. Everybody gets rich and buys a boat, or you get nothing and you get to do it again. So I did 2 startups after level 3, and I still don't have a boat, nor an island. So I was in that, okay, it's time to figure out what's next. And I had a couple of options on the table. I had a job offer to be the VP of HR for another technology company here in town, but I was kind of over it, right? I had done that a few times, wasn't super excited about it. I got a call from a friend of mine who runs a search firm here in town. And he said, hey, we want to start an HR consulting practice. And I said, okay, great. Why are you telling me that? He said, because we don't know how to do it, but you do. So would you be interested in maybe writing us a business plan to show us what you would do? And I said, okay, I'm happy to do that. So I did. And then, it had been a few years since I had run my own shop. I thought I should talk to somebody about this business plan to see if I'm even, still on the right page. So I thought, who do I know that's doing this work, that's successful at it? And Morag and I passed each other at level 3. I was coming in 2007, right as she was leaving to start SkyeTeam. So I thought, well, I don't know her, but I know of her and we know who each other are. I'll call her. And I just picked up the phone and I called her and I said, hey, you don't know me, but you know who I am and I know who you are. I have a favor. Would you mind meeting me for coffee and looking through this business plan that I've written about this practice that's similar to yours, and just check me, make sure that my assumptions are reasonable and it looks okay. And she said, yeah, happy to. So we met for coffee and she looked through it. And she said, She said, well, you can put anything on a plan. It's all, and this has become a catchphrase, and one of the reasons why you'll find unicorns on everything that SkyeTeam does. She said, it's all wishes, ponies, and unicorns until the money's in the bank. And I'm like, that's true. She's like, but otherwise it looks pretty good. And we kept talking, and she said, so you're going to do one of these things, right? You're going to take this HR job, or you're going to do this consulting thing. And I said, yeah, probably. And at the time, it was like the end of October of 2012. And I said, but I'm not doing anything till first of the year. I'm going to take it easy through the holidays and figure it out. Well, make a short story long, she said, so why don't we do it together?
Wow.
And I went, didn't see that coming. Um, I said, well, okay, let me think about it. And then I did what I do, and she did what she does. I went and I talked to everybody that I knew that knew her. And she, being British and conservative, she talked to nobody. So basically, everybody that I talked to was like, yeah, you should do this. And I thought, let's do it. So she had a gig to do in Kansas City 2 weeks later. She's like, why don't you just come with me? And we'll see if there's any chemistry, if we get along, if we, yell at each other. Let's see how it goes. I'm like, okay, let's do it. And we went to Kansas City and talked to the SHRM chapter there and had a blast. And I'm like, this is it. Let's do it. And I hitched my horse to that cart at that moment. And we had a few other people filter in and out. Ruby landed a couple of years after me, and it's been the Three Musketeers since. And this is when that sort of hockey stick of all the leaders really started to take off. Because of the way we do our work, we've done so many programs inside of organizations where those people have left and gone to other companies, and then we've been brought in there. To your point about that leader ripple effect in the beginning, that's true. And that happens really quickly. When you're doing, any given week, we'll do a handful of workshops, right? We'll do a handful of team development sessions. We'll do a handful of one-on-one coachings. And in addition to that, I run a podcast called the Corporate Bartender for the HR community. And I've met a ton of leaders that I've had on as guests on the show for HR and talent and people leaders that I've done work with or brought them in on projects that I've been working on. It's just been a share the love kind of situation. And it's been fantastic, right? It's the abundance mindset that we espouse in the book.
Beautiful, beautiful. And we're going to talk to you about the book later of this conversation. But let me bring you back into 2012.
Okay.
That October time, okay?
Yeah.
Out of the million people why did you decide to call her?
She was one of maybe a half a dozen people that I knew that was doing the work. She was one of two that were local, and we had the level 3 connection. And I knew from my assessment of the caliber of folks who went through that machine, I thought she's probably a good egg. And she lived in Broomfield, which is like 10 minutes from where I lived in Colorado. So we were able to find a Starbucks that was about 5 minutes from each of our houses, and that's where we met up. And and we probably sat there and talked for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Yeah. So it was just, and I mean, luck, chance, randomness. I asked around for a few people, and enough people said her name. Then I thought, oh, she's probably a good one to call. Not scientific, right? I didn't have a process. It was just sort of throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what stuck. And thankfully, I met Morag.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful. And that is the power of intentional, right? So you were intentional to connect and learn from her, open book for her to see your business plan and ask for the feedback. So it's very, very, like proactive in the way that you did, Eric. So it's a good learning lesson for our audience out there. If you want to do something, be proactive, right? Be intentional.
Well, and I think this too, right? I wasn't asking Morag for a job, right? I didn't want anything from her except a little bit of her time. And I paid for the coffee. So,
paid for the coffee.
it was almost a no ask request, right? Like I just wanted to borrow her brain for a few minutes. And that few minutes turned into, oh, I think there might be some chemistry here. I think we may be able to make a pretty good team. And I mean, that's a serendipitous leap on a first date.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we've hired, and well, in my career, I've worked in talent acquisition. Everybody's close rate on rockstar hires is not 100%. It's more like a baseball batting average, right? 30% is pretty good. So to be able to suss that out, I mean, there's bigger things at play, right, in the universe.
Yep. And probably that is the foundation set forth for the three of you to write the book together, you, me, we, right? So it started you, and then end it by we in the power of relationship. So we're gonna get into that after this question, okay?
Yeah.
So for 12 years being with SkyeTeam, what changes have you seen in yourself?
Oh, I've seen a ton of change, right? I mean, coming into this, I aspired to be as confident and sure as Morag was on stage or in front of a group of people. You know, I'm an introverted disc C INTJ. Being in front of people, other than being on stage playing music, which I was super comfortable with, like I didn't want anything to do with getting up in front of talking to people, right? I played drums. I got to hide behind the drum kit. I sing now. That's a different story altogether. But I wanted to be like her, and I knew I had a lot of ground to cover. So I did it the old-fashioned way. I just did repetitions. I would do any gig I could do. If nobody wanted to go to Toledo next Tuesday, I'll go. I'll speak to that group. I'll go off and do that workshop in nowhere, Idaho. That's fine. And I just did it. I did a lot of it, and we got really good at it. You know, the live in-person event thing. And we were starting to hit our stride when COVID hit. And at that point in time, 95% of our business was live in a room with other people, right? And on March 13th, Friday the 13th, 2020, everything changed. And we made some pretty tough decisions. Morag, in her prescience, she said, buy all the best studio gear you can buy. Go feed your inner studio nerd and buy cameras and lights and audio gear, and because we're going to have to do this here, and that's a whole different thing. And if you could see my room, I've got giant lights, I've got this audio rack over here, I've got a big camera up top, I've got this microphone. Like, we went all in, and we learned how to do this digitally at the same level that we were doing live in person. Now that took us a while, 6 months, a year, to figure it out, iron out the kinks, such that now digital componentry is part of all of our programs. You know, we'll maybe kick them off and close them up in person, but then the middle bits will be done digitally, or we'll do 3 in-person stops and 2 or 5 digital stops, right? That has been a profound change, right? Like you, I wasn't doing podcasting before the pandemic, but my partner in life and on the show, Lori Lance, we decided that we needed to pull together all of our HR leaders and friends and folks to get together and talk about what people are doing. We noticed that executives, when the pandemic hit, were looking at their HR people going, what are we supposed to do? And HR people were looking at each other going, I don't know. We've never done this before. So we built a community of 250-ish people. And we used to get together 3 times a week to talk about, what are you doing? What worked? What didn't work? What has changed with the legal landscape that we have to pay attention to? Are you buying chairs for your people at home? What sort of allowances are you giving them? How are you doing return to work? All of that. And we just wanted to create a community where we could share ideas and best practices so that everybody in it didn't have to reinvent those things for themselves. So that was a big lift, and that was totally new, right? And we have done that show now 190 times, I think. We do it once a week now, and we do it a little bit differently. We do it live in quotes, to the community. So the community members will jump on the call, and we'll either interview a guest or we'll have a conversation about a hot news item, right? Like I said, we've talked about return to office policies probably 30 times because nobody's still figured that out, right? And then we'll produce the show and put it out later. So that shift, as things started to settle back down into a more pre-pandemic pattern, you know, with regard to travel and in-person events and those sorts of things, I now show up at those events like I wanted to when I started with Morag. I'm not nervous about it. I'm not worried about what somebody might say or think or a question I might get asked. I show up and I step into that frame and I just own it. And it's so much fun.
Yeah.
So much fun.
Because the intention of the program was to helping by sharing best practices. So why worry about small little issue here and there, a little hiccup here and there, right? So thanks for doing that, Eric, because having the people who don't know, who struggling also learning from those around us and not have to go through the whole reinventing the wheel and, you know, just learn from the thing that works, right? Now go to the book. I want to congratulate the three of you for writing that book, because throughout my interviews with leaders around the world, that's two things that normally they share that they regret not doing yet. Okay, one was having their own company. So you did have your own company a few times, right? And even at SkyeTeam, it looked like it's your own company too. So the three of you to run the whole show, right?
Yeah.
The second regret was they wanted to write a book to share their stories, their expertise and stuff, but they didn't find, time or whatever the reason that for them to write that book yet, right? So I congratulate the three of you for having the book We, and also with a lot of awards for that. Tell us the journey that leading to writing that beautiful book, please.
Yeah. So when I arrived at SkyeTeam, Morag was just finishing her first book called Cultivate, The Power of Winning Relationships. And SkyeTeam's focus is on workplace relationships. You know, it's like everybody has their angle. If you hire the table group, you're going to get some flavor of 5 dysfunctions of a team, no matter what work they're doing. If you hire SkyeTeam, there's going to be some lensing through the lens of relationships at work, right? Because the work that led to Morag's first book and that we did in between books, the research that we did led us to come to know that the biggest influencer of happiness, engagement, and productivity, not only at work, but in life, are the relationships that you have with the people you spend the most time with. And we work more than we do most things in life, right? So workplace relationships are really important. So it's funny because when Cultivate came out, we always talked about the next book. What's going to be next? So Cultivate came out in 2013, and we talked about the next book for 8 years.
Wow.
We had planning meetings about it. We went and did a week in an off-site location, and we were just busy like most people. The reason that you said most people don't write that book, they can't find the time. Well, upside of the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden the three of us were not traveling every week. We're all here and we got some time. So we thought, if we don't write it now, shame on us. That's our fault. So we capitalized. We jumped on that tiger and wrote it. And we got the book written. We started it in 2020. Manuscript was finished in I think we finished it in November of 2021. So it took us about a year to get the book done. And then, if you know anything about publishing, there's a calendar you got to get on. And, you think, oh, the manuscript's done, the book will be out in a couple of months. Nope. The book will be out in several months, maybe a year from now. And so the book came out October 21st of 2022. And It was just a fortuitous alignment of the planets around the timing, because we were forced to come off the road. We were forced to rethink how we did our jobs, and it gave us an opportunity to really have no choice but to prioritize the thing we've been talking about for several years.
Wow. Tell us, what is the book about? In more detail, please.
Yeah. So the book is a companion book to Morag's first book, and we look at them in slightly different ways. So Cultivate, The Power of Winning Relationships, is sort of an outside-in book. It gives you the tools to assess the quality of your workplace relationships, like take stock in them, figure out where you stand. You, Me, We is an inside-out book. It's about the choices, the intentional choices that you're choosing to make in specific relationships with the people that you work with, right? It is based on the idea of what we call the ally mindset. And the ally mindset is made up of 5 different practices. Some of these practices will come more naturally to you. Some of them will take a little bit more energy. Some of them will be a lift. And what this framework gives you the opportunity to do is go, okay, in my relationships, I'm not good at say abundance and generosity is really easy for me, but candor and debate is hard. But in order for me to show up as what we call an ally to that other person, I've got to be able to flex all 5 of those practices, and even the ones I don't like. So if candor and debate is hard for me, I know I'm going to have to put some energy in there, and I'm going to have some conversations that may be harder for me, but done for the betterment of the relationship, the betterment of the team, the betterment of the organization.
I see. So the you, me, we is the inside out. So it starts from us first, in order for us to build a relationship, to the group, and then to the bigger group, right?
Yeah.
Who decided to name the book You, Me, We?
Oh man, naming a book is like naming a baby or naming a band. It's a terrible process. Every name is terrible. When you tell somebody, hey, we're thinking about naming our book or our baby or our band this, somebody goes, oh no, I knew it. I knew a person with that name and they were not nice. Or why would you call it that? That doesn't even make sense. We tried on a lot of names, but in Morag's first book, The Relationship Ecosystem, which identifies 4 relationship types, we call them dynamics. They are ally, supporter, rival, and adversary. That 4 square sits on 2 continua, and the vertical continua goes from unconditional up top to conditional at the bottom. And the horizontal continua goes from a me focus on the left to a we focus on the right. So we had this concept of me to we and shifting of the mindset, right? Me to we. And we'd use that language in workshops for years. So we liked that idea. But these are choices that you're going to make in individual relationships, because every relationship's different. Relationships are built or destroyed one conversation at a time. So it's not just me and it's not just we, there's a you factor in there too, right? So it's thinking about the choices that I make that come easy to me, that are advantageous for me. What are the choices that I'm forced to make that are advantageous for you? And what's the subset of all that that betters both of us? So we thought, okay, there's a little triangle in here. How does that work? In the book art, it comes out as 3 circles because of graphic design, but I love it. And I think just from hearing it, it's compelling, right? It's like, okay, there are 3 points of view here, yours, mine, and ours. How do we leverage the intentional choices that we make to make things better? Because a lot of times, we navigate work relationships by feel. We do it by gut, by pattern. We do what worked before. I'll do that again. What worked with this person? Well, I'll just do it with this person. Well, that's not how human beings work.
Yeah.
right? I need to take some stock, assess my situation, right? The cultivate outside in approach. And then if I'm holding up my end of the bargain here, I have to be intentional about what my choices are. I can't just replicate my pattern. If I'm successful or we're successful, then we're lucky. But if we're being intentional, man, the magic can happen much faster.
Beautiful. Yep. Eric, we heard about me and we a lot, right? Me and we a lot in textbook, at work, at home, right? And the third part is the you in here is pretty new, and I'd like you to share more about how we can be contributing in as the you in a relationship in here. Can you?
Yeah, I mean, I think of it this way, right? Because relationships are so unique. I mean, they are literal snowflakes. They're not two that are the same. If I'm not considering the you in that exchange, if I'm just trying to get from what I want to, what's going to make the company more successful, I'm missing a step. I'm missing an opportunity. Because you've got your own rich history and set of experiences. And if I know you as the finance guy or the marketing guy, and I don't dig any deeper into your story, well, what an opportunity lost, right? Going back to my HR business partner days, my backstory made me more apt to be successful in that role. And yet many people typecast me as just the HR guy. I remember we did an acquisition one time and I went to the staff meeting of the new executive and she said, HR, why are you here? I'm not firing anyone today. And I was like, well, that's not really how we do it here, but maybe we could get some time. So if she would have taken that time to understand A, our approach, and B, the value that I could bring to her table, well, we would have had a different start to that relationship. We eventually got there. But there's an opportunity as a relationship grows over time for you to make investments in that other person. And that's a choice.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That's the choice, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Eric, you told me that picking up the name for the book was like naming a baby, right? The next question is even harder for you because now I'm going to ask you to pick a chapter in the book that you like most. I know it's not a fair question to ask you, but if there's one question, one chapter that you would love to share to our audience, what would that chapter be and why?
Yeah, I think it would be the chapter on courage and vulnerability in the book.
Courage and vulnerability.
Courage and vulnerability. Vulnerability is an interesting concept. I think in business, we get programmed to believe that being vulnerable is being weak. And in relationships, being vulnerable is where the magic actually happens. We at SkyeTeam love Brene Brown, and Brene Brown, this is her cornerstone, shame and vulnerability. And in that chapter, I tell a story about me. I'm an anxiety and depression person, and during my time at SkyeTeam, I had one of those proverbial rock bottom moments, and I had to tell my colleagues what was going on. I had to tell Morag and Ruby what was going on, and I was terrified to do so because I thought they're never going to trust me again. I'm not going to get any client work by myself. Like it's going to be terrible. I had to let my wall entirely down and be completely vulnerable in a way that I had never done professionally, rarely done personally. But I knew I had to do it. And so I did. And they just hugged me and helped me. And they didn't take anything away or fire me. And it actually solidified our relationships in a different way. But it is against a lot of our hardwiring to be that open and that vulnerable because there's a lot of risk. What are they going to think? How are they going to treat me? What are the stories they're going to write? And I was just at that point in my journey where it didn't matter. They needed to know what was going on here. And because it was starting to impact my work, right? It was showing up in how I came to work every day because, you know, we flirt with the fallacy that there's this work life and there's this home life. There's not. There's just life.
Yeah.
It's just one life, right?
Just one life. Yeah.
That's it. And I you know, I got to be honest with you. That moment was a pivotal moment in, well, in my life, generally speaking, but in my relationships at work, the relationships that I had invested in over the past few years with Morag and Ruby, they became different in that moment for the better.
Beautiful. And Eric, when you talk about, when you say that you pick the chapter about courage and vulnerability, my thought was about the whole journey that you've been at SkyeTeam also. I didn't know that it's about, you know, the moment that you shared, you know, the you know, your secret to Amar and Ruby. But I thought it was about, you know, being an introverted person like you and starting to go out into, you know, like big events and running a lot of, you know, programs with strangers around the country, right? So it's also a side
Also
of, you know,
true.
courage and show up your vulnerabilities and learn from that. So thanks for sharing that, because I
Yeah.
think that a lot of us need to have that courage, okay? And a lot of us are vulnerable with a lot of things too. So, you know, be open for it and then be supporting for one another so that they can overcome their vulnerability also is very important, okay?
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
And it's not natural for a lot of folks, and it doesn't come easy to a lot of people. And a lot of, like I said, a lot of how we grew up teaches us that that's not always the best way to be. And there are times when not only is it appropriate, but it's necessary to get to the core, right? I mean, if I'm going to show up authentically and you show up authentically, we're going to have much more meaningful conversations much faster than if we're each doing the political dance, or I'm only supposed to say this because I work for this person and you work for that person and they don't like each other. So we have to do this company dance thing that I see in a lot of corporate cultures. That's just not helpful.
Yeah.
The more authentic we can be, the better. And the best opportunity for that is in individual one-on-one relationships.
Beautiful and beautiful. And earlier I noted here is about relationship, friendship, right? One at a time that you mentioned here. I want to ask you the 5 people in your circle, the 5 friends that Eric Spencer spent most of his time with. Who are they, and tell us a little bit about them, please.
Yeah, easy peasy.
Easy.
So, you know, primarily, right, is super easy. My partner in life is Lori. She's my host on the Corporate Bartender, and you know, we do similar work, so we get to talk shop and nerd out about stuff, and that's fun. So that's one. Morag and Ruby would be 2 and 3. Because, like I said, I get to do really meaningful, impactful work with clients that do good in the world with people that I actually love, right? Literally. That's great. I play in a band with 2 other guys, and we've been doing that for 10 years together now, so 11 years now. And it's just a blast. It's just a blast. It's a different vibe. I get to go be kind of a different person in that frame. Not work Eric. I get to be old, you know, wants to grow up to be a rock star Eric. Fully understanding that at 53, the rock star day, that train has left the station. But on a random Saturday night at a brew pub in you know, Longmont, Colorado, you might see it. You might see it come out.
What are they? What's the name?
So the band is called, again, all band names are stupid. All book names are stupid, and don't tell anybody what you're going to name your band. The band's called Rogue 2. It's an obscure Empire Strikes Back reference. Rogue 2 is the name of the snowspeeder pilot that finds Han and Luke after they've been out on Hoth all night, and everybody thought they were dead. We're nerds. And we had batted around 100 ideas and everybody's like, oh, I like this one. I hate that one. I like this one. I'm like, we're just going to pick one. And I'm going to go with the Star Wars reference because I'm a Star Wars nerd. So there you go. Rogue 2.
Rogue 2.
And then I think the other people that I would put on that list are my kids. My kids are not kids anymore. They're 23 and almost 20. So, and my youngest is a musician, and she and I collaborate on songs together, and that's a fun thing to do.
That seems so fun. Okay, would you please send my regards to all of them? To all of them, say that there's a man from Vietnam saying hello to all of them. Okay,
absolutely, would love
thanks them for being a great part of your life, so that you can have the energy and enthusiasm to continue spread goodness to the leaders around your works. I have two last questions before we end this conversation. So my wife and I, we've been on the quest to help people to improve their ability to think, Eric, because we believe that our thinking capability these days is diminishing. So every chance we talk to the people who are amazing at thinking, who help people to grow their ability to think like you, we ask this question: how have you been improved your ability to think over the years?
Yeah, great question. And I'm a nerd, right? I'm a technology nerd. I have a device, that has recently changed my life. I've been a lifelong journaler. I tried different stuff, morning pages, different frameworks. And like a lot of people, it's the persistence and consistency that has been hard for me. And it's because of the way I approach data. I don't like to commingle my data. So I'd have my personal journal book and my work notebook and my gratitude journal. I had all these books. Well, right before the holidays, I acquired this device, and they don't pay me any money, but boy, this device has changed my life and elevated my thinking for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a single-use device. It has no apps. There are no notifications. I get no pop-ups. So in the morning, I've been doing morning pages for a while now. So morning pages are just 3 pages, unfettered, whatever comes out of your brain, as close to when you wake up in the morning as possible. And I will go somewhere and I will leave my phone behind, and I take my single-use device, and I'm actually able to think.
Beautiful.
Which has been fantastic. I have all of my notebooks in this notebook, so now I'm not carrying around a backpack full of notebooks, right? I used to carry 3 or 4, and they were small little moleskin notebooks, but I travel all the time. That's putting an extra 3 or 4 pounds in the bag that I don't need to carry. I'm able to keep all of my stuff in this device separate, and when I want to just interact with it undistractedly, I interact with it. So for me, the real answer to your question is to get free of distraction, and I think that's really hard today, especially in how we're expected to communicate with people. It's real time all the time, and that's not how human brains work. They don't scale in that capacity. So at SkyeTeam, we've cut deals. Like I block time on my calendar. If it says block, I'm probably not going to respond to your Slack, right?
Yeah.
I had a guest on my show who talked about this concept of what he called a Zen day, which I have taken on, and I will block once a month, a day, full day during the week.
One full day.
One full day that I'm not doing work unless I choose to do so. My objective of the Zen day is to take stock of the period that has just passed, so the last month or whatever, however long it's been, and to plan for the one that's upcoming.
Beautiful.
And to do that in a distraction-free, expectation-free environment, it's allowed me to reconnect with deeper thinking. Because I agree with you, the thinking is not hip. It's on the decline. And I think that's a lot of that is just environmental. It's hard to think deeply when, your text alert is going off and you're getting a Slack message and you just got 4 new emails and somebody Facebooked you or Snap tweeted you, whatever the kids are using today, right? It's just too much.
Yeah.
And you never get into a flow state.
Yeah.
And for me, to be able to do that is so valuable, but I can't even do it in this room. It's too distracting for me. I'm too lured by the slickness of the internet. I just want to know what's going on. But I pick up my distraction-free device and I'll go sit on the deck, or I'll go down to the coffee shop and I'll leave my phone here. People will be okay if they can't get a hold of me for the next hour and a half. It'll be fine.
Can I see the device again? It's saying remarkable sleeping. Is that?
Yeah, it's the Remarkable 2, and it's just basically like I said, it's a single-use device. It is for note taking primarily.
For note taking. I see. Got it.
Yeah. And what I love about it, in addition to the distraction-free properties, is it syncs up across all your devices. So, I was one of those people that, how many times have you done this? You've written down a list to buy at the grocery, to go out to the market and get for food, and you walk out of the house and the list is on the counter in the kitchen, and you get there and you think, I can only remember 3 things that I was supposed to get. I know I'm coming back today. So now I make my shopping list on the Remarkable. It automatically syncs to my phone. So when I get to the store, I just go, oh, I know what I'm getting
now. Beautiful. And imagine if we as individuals can get rid of the noises, the distractions, how great a relationship we can be with one another, right?
We talk about the concept of deep presence. This is Ruby's sort of manifesto. To successfully navigate relationships at the level that we're talking about in the book, it requires this notion of deep presence. Like if you're going to be in a conversation with somebody, be in it, right? Like I'm here talking to you. Normally I would have my text app over here and Slack over here and, Spotify over here, right? Right now I've got you. That's it. And, my Remarkable, because I took a note or two, some things you said, but that's it, right? Like that notion of deep presence is hard now. And I think that was exacerbated by the pandemic because everybody was kind of in a weird spot. We were dealing with a whole bunch of stuff that we'd never dealt with. And it took its mental health toll on a lot of folks, myself included. And coming back to the sort of normal, it's hard. Yeah. I find like I used to be able to facilitate full day programs and it was great. Now a half day program, I'm tired. Right. And it's just because of that focus that it takes to effectively deliver the program. Like those muscles are atrophied. They're impacted in a different way because of the 2 years of perpetual distraction.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it was a long time and there's a lot of things going on in the world that I didn't want to hear about anymore. I watched a lot of Friends, the old sitcom Friends, over the pandemic because it was like putting on a cozy sweater. I didn't have to worry about anything, but it was a distraction. And I think that brain chemistry gets altered when those patterns get established over time.
Yep. Yeah. The last question, Eric, is it's about you, but it's a different you. It's about you in the future. Okay. So we knew now that at young age you want to be a musician full time, right? Your father said no, you have to go somewhere, and that leading to you a phenomenal career at startup and in HR, and now helping leaders around the world to get better at leading their teams or be better teams. And better teams mean better organization, better home, also better relationship everywhere, right? Let's go to the future a little bit. Is there anything that Eric Spencer is working on that he is exciting? You want to share with us so that we can celebrate with him in advance?
Yeah, I mean, I think about, it's an interesting question. I was having this conversation with a coaching client today. I said, in our career journeys, we have these definitive phases that we go through, right? When we come fresh out of school and have our first real job, we don't feel competent. We don't feel like we've got the experience or credibility. So we're working really hard to build that experience. And then somewhere phase two kicks in. For me, it was my mid 30s where I'm like, okay, I'm reasonably competent at this job. I'm pretty decent at it. And I feel like I've earned that, seat at the table. And that lasts about 10 years. And then you get into the, how am I too old? Am I irrelevant? Like, do I have anything to add to the conversation anymore? And it's an interesting sort of arc. The way I've started to think about from today forward is more from a professorial or researcher mindset, right? When we work with leaders, I'm not leaning on my experiences. I'm leaning on the work that we've done over the last decade. I'm leaning on the research that we've conducted. I'm leaning on the data that I've learned about through other people's research. So making that mental shift from subject matter expert to researcher and teacher, sharer of knowledge, it's kind of a fundamental shift that's just occurred to me recently when faced with the question, how long are you going to be relevant at the front of the classroom, right? And it made me think about professors that I had in school, and there were two types. There were the professors who were still working. They were still doing things, keynoting, doing research, running their own side hustle, running businesses. And then there were those professors who went out after they graduated with their PhD. They had one job. They worked there for a few years, and then they came back and finished up that PhD and stayed in academia forever. I always loved talking to those professors who were still doing, learning, researching, and running businesses because they had stuff to add irrespective of their age. I didn't even care about that. Versus the one-trick pony professor who had nothing new to add to the party. So for me, it's this fundamental shift into, right, what's the next book? What's the next media thing? Like, The Bartender is a labor of love that we build for a community, but I love doing it. I love interviewing people and talking to people like you about what makes them light up. What goodness are they bringing to the world? So it's figuring out how to leverage that into this next phase. That's what excites me.
Beautiful. So if you figure out something that exciting ahead of time, what's next, right? There's always things for you to aim in to do it better, faster, more enjoyable. And thanks for sharing that, because a lot of us don't have that what next question in our head. So it could be a wake up call for them to rethink about something exciting for them to do in the future. Like the one question, if you do one thing for 20 years, don't put into your resume that you have 20 years of experience.
Right. Exactly.
Eric, it's so amazing to connect and learning from you. Thanks a lot for being so kind to join our program and share your stories. I asked if we can schedule an hour. Now we talk about 70 minutes already, and 80 minutes already. It's amazing. And my friend, if you and your family ever decided to travel to this part of the world, and including Mora, Ruby, and Lori, and your two friends at the band also, if they ever decided to travel here, definitely shout out to me. I love to take you guys out. Okay.
I love it. I love it. Like I said at the beginning, I will likely hold you to that because Vietnam is definitely on our list. We've got a list. So yes, I would love to do that. Yes. It was a pleasure to meet you, my friend.
It's a pleasure to meet you, and thanks a lot for the work that you are doing. Building good relationship definitely will help people to enjoy happiness. That is that is
Yeah.
the journey we all seek for, right? So
Yeah, and I do want to say thank you for the work that you're doing in the world. This Labor of Love podcast that you're doing is a beautiful piece of work. So thank you for doing it.
thank you very much. Thank you very much. You have a wonderful evening. Say hello to your children first. Okay.
All right, will do. Take care.
Bye
Cheers.
bye. Cheers.